What
What's
is
up?
it about people and French vanilla coffee?
Yo!
Welcome back to another episode of Nerds Around, guys. It's your host, Sebastian.
It's your boy Lo.
And your boy Tone from across the hall.
And today we have with us the one, the only, Johnny C.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This is fun.
What's up, man? I got one question for you. What's
up?
it about people and French vanilla coffee?
Yo! Legit.
Have you tried it? Have you tried the special vanilla blend?
I haven't had the opportunity to, but I needed to ask because reading Surrounded by Death, and you got your main character jumping into the bowels of hell to get these people some coffee.
Yeah, man, it's some really tasty coffee, right? Sebastian, I know
I can sign off on that. There's some really good coffee.
Sebastian, would you slay some zombies for that coffee blend?
Oh, bro, I'm going to have to go out there with my weed whacker, baseball bat with knives on it. Bro, that coffee blend.
That coffee sounds
Johnny made some
serious,
coffee.
man.
Oh, man. Jeez.
I've been fortunate enough to have the beers by the Wayward Bros, but I have not had Johnny C's coffee, and it makes me very, very, very sad.
Yes, I've heard. That's how I heard about you too from Seabass. He told me about your booth where you have the coffee and then you're selling your comics and everything. So
marketing genius.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so it just kind of worked out. It's just like, I mean, at times the coffee overtakes the book a little bit, but like really the book Surrounded by Death, I mean, it's a story about a group of survivors living out the zombie apocalypse in a mall where they're trying to live like nothing's really wrong. It's almost like the times that we're living in currently. You know what I mean? Like we're all surrounded by death, but we're all trying to like live normally still, and it's hard, right?
Bro, it's like this. You captured everything perfectly because it's like some of this felt like a zombie apocalypse. It was like, what's going next in 2020? So, I mean, first of all, for me, Surrounded by Death was the art style. But again, your writing, a lot of people don't know this. Your writing is just key on point with characterization and everything. So, I mean, what made you want to pick them all? Because the first thing when you mentioned about it being a mall, I thought of George Romero's it was the second one of the
Dawn of the Dead.
But it's like what made you pick them all, and what inspired the coffee?
So the story is actually a collaboration amongst three individuals. So the original idea of sending it in a mall wasn't, didn't originate necessarily with me. It's one of my co-collaborators. His name is Mark Elliott. We met in San Diego. It was a creator connection type environment like we do in New York, the New York Comic Con. And essentially, he had this story, and he was kind of just there to hang out and meet people, but not really to get anything made. And his only example was this thing that he wanted to novelize, which was called Surrounded by Death. And I started flipping through it, and I'm like, this can't be a book. This has to be a comic. Like, there's just so many things here that, I can just see jump off the page. And, he's kind of a novice writer, too, and some of the characters felt like just a little, like, one-sided in ways. So I kind of injected a little bit more personality there. And then we met our artist, Joe Martinez. Actually, I met him at New York Comic Con. We were waiting in line for the Walking Dead panel. And it was like a fiasco. There was just, we're never going to get in. But we kind of just like befriended each other, and we swapped, contacts. And I told him I was making comics at the time. I had Sartana, my spaghetti western. And he was like, "Oh, it's pretty cool. I've wanted to get into that." And sure enough, we, eventually, everything came together. We ended up doing Surrounded by Death. And so, as a matter of fact, issue 1 is his very first thing art-wise, like, in forever, since he was like younger.
Oh wow!
So like that's and you could see, like, I don't know if you guys read issue 2, but you can kind of see his art get a little bit better and better as you go.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, I'm sure because it's his first one and it's your first time collaborating, the style, everyone's style and voices are going to get more solidified as it goes on. For sure.
Yeah, it's like a writer's room for a TV series, right? Like the characters pretty much write themselves once you've established them. You know what I mean? So like right now I'm on writing issue 3, and I really don't like when I start to write Pete. Pete speaks for himself. Like I'm just like almost a vessel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because his characterization in my head is just so well formulated, and it kind of just it works. You know, we just pick the scenarios. We gather together as a team. We talk about it online, and then I have actually issue 3 was scripted by somebody else, but I formatted it for comic panels. But all the stories are all originated by us together, and particularly the coffee you mentioned, Sebastian. That was just kind of the story arc. Now, it's really not about the coffee; it's about leadership, right? So you kind of have this balance of power between Matt, I like to consider him as our Ryan Reynolds type. He's like our Van Wilder.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you have Todd, the security guard, who's just kind of like this law and order.
Yeah.
He's modeled slightly after. You ever see Observe and Report?
Oh yeah.
With Seth Rogen.
Yeah,
He's a little bit Seth Rogen from Observe and Report. So like you kind of want to like him a little bit sometimes because he's like mean, like he wants to do well, but like he's also on the spectrum. And then, there's like the Van Wilder. So like you got Matt, who's like our hero kind of guy, right? So then it becomes a balance of power, and people know they really love this. They know that this coffee blend, this vanilla blend, is kind of like the most popular thing in the mall. You know what I mean? It's like the Popeyes chicken sandwich. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you put it in that context, it's like whoever can provide is the balance of power. And then that's kind of what put Matt on the task. But then we also have a subplot where Matt's this kind of love-lost, like lovelorn kind of individual who's pining after this girl Karen in the mall. So really it's a lot about his selfish motivation to kind of impress her. But it's also for the people. So there's like a lot of threads going through it for Matt, and and then he's got the support of his friend Pete, and Pete's like he's the security guy the maintenance guy for the mall. And he is a little bit on the spectrum, and his best friend is Matt. And he doesn't know how to talk to girls. He's just not good with talking to people. He calls people out. But he's like always there for Matt. He's like Matt's diehard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that definitely comes through too. Like when I was reading the first issue, you just see like these guys are like that's like their ride or die. Like he's there for them. He's obviously going to go into this pit with them. He's got his piece. He's ready to go. Like, that definitely does come through, and I feel like the ripping the inner circle that I've noticed in that main group, especially from the opening beginning where they do the rating for how we got here. So like that seems like a really close knit group of folks that are kind of just ripping and jabbing at each other, but we're also curious about them, which I noticed in your comic when they in the second issue where you talk about where the other two guys got the ladder from. There's an asterisk that says you'll find out about this later. So
I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because that's one of those things where we talked about like, do we want to set this up? Like I hadn't seen that in a comic in a long time. That little asterisk going, hey, like this was in this issue or whatever, So I was like, let's set one of those up. Let's do a thing like that,
But now we're gonna dive into the pond, which to me it's like, I love your stories. I'm just sad that it's 2 issues.
I was hoping for a little bit more.
I was hoping that's
always the best and worst like compliment to get.
But yeah,
like,
there's
just,
no
more.
But
I love it so much. I want more.
But you packed so much from that first issue all the way to the last issue. That ending, I was like, oh, that messed up, but it was good.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Again, I mean, what was the creative process for the Pawn? What did you have to dive deep in? And also, too, kudos on choosing to keep this book black and white, because I think that lended a lot to the atmosphere that you created. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into the deaths there, because the deaths are like, oh, okay. But yes, let's get into that creative process. Are we
doing a content spoiler warning, Tone? Do we have to do it? Do we have to hit it with Tone?
Do we have to?
I mean, let's go ahead, Tone. Go
ahead. All right. So we're diving into Nerds of the Round spoiler territory. So, AKA Tony Stark dies.
All right. That's been established.
All right.
I love it. So the Pawn originated as an 8-page short story.
Cool.
So the very, very original concept started. I was at a convention, sitting behind a table. It was kind of winding down, so it's when creators start mingling. And I don't know if you know Charles D. Moussant or Philo Barnhart at all.
No, probably like this.
Philo worked on Disney movies, Little Mermaid, things like that. Charles, they always partner together at shows, but Charles has a Silver Phoenix Entertainment, and he does this anthology series about Bachelor's Grove, and it's kind of like a little bit of a horror thing. Charles is a very eccentric cat. At shows, he has roller skates, so you'll see him like zip by, like down aisleways and things like that. And he came roller skating up to me at a show, didn't even know me, didn't know nothing. He goes, "You make comics?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Would you like to do a short in one of my anthology books?" I'm like, "Sure." What's the deal? He goes, 8 pages, and he gave me criteria. He goes, make diverse characters, and it has to be set in either. And he gave me 3 locations. It was like one was like a barn, the other one was a cemetery, the other one was a pond. And I'm like, "Ooh, a pond," and like that kind of like. And I go, "Yeah, I'll let you know." And he gave me his card, and then I kind of tinkered with the idea for a little bit. I was just thinking about horror stories, and I was revisiting and thinking about all the stuff that I loved growing up horror story-wise, and a lot of it led back to Tales from the Crypt and the anthology series, all the good old school.
This has, yes.
Yeah. Tales, really more so Tales from the Crypt more than anything, or Tales from the Dark Side. Like, that's kind of like one of the main inspirations for the pond. But I want to do something that grim, like Tales from the Crypt, like you would have this really cool story or like this really horrific story, and not always would it end very happy. Like sometimes it would end like very horrifically. That's kind of like what I wanted to do here. So I wanted to tell the story, and I also like other things. Like I like The Thing. It was actually kind of one of the inspirations as well. I love creature horror. I love body horror, that kind of thing too. You know what I mean? So when people transform, and the other part of the idea of the creature was that I've always wanted to do a remake of The Blob. You know the movie The Blob?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember The Blob.
Instead of making it like a jelly creature, what I wanted it to be was like it started with one person being infected and then touching another person and then fusing together. And then eventually the Blob becoming a fusion of multitudes of people.
Every bad anime experiment gone wrong. Oh,
yeah.
No.
And then it was like, and then they become like, like Critters 2 when they all become a giant ball.
Yeah.
And they roll through the city.
Ball of teeth.
I wanted to be, like a ball of teeth. I wanted to be a ball of like blubber and like madness and gore. And like I wanted that to be the Blob, right? And
then red jelly.
Yeah. Not just red jelly, not just Jello.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so I was like, well, let me put a little flavor of that idea into this, and that's kind of a little bit of what it became, where it starts absorbing people, and when it comes back, it kind of brings a little piece of whatever to that individual.
That's what freaked me out in that part too. When I got to a part that they did that you did that in the book. I was like, oh, this is some freaky shit right now.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I wanted to kind of touch upon that. Like that's some of the stuff that kind of like freaks me out personally, right? So like, to see your loved ones transformed, or to even yourself lose your humanity, like in The Fly, or things like that. It's kind of a little bit of what I wanted to touch upon.
But I wanted to get the dialogue that you have between the father and the daughter. And it's funny how you went from that dialogue in the first issue, how he was telling her no monsters, and then that second issue, monsters are real. Like, how was it coming up with that dialogue for those two characters? That was just one of those moments for me.
Yeah. So that one was like what was the most heartfelt shit I could write, basically, on the first issue, right? And like, how do I like establish this relationship between the daughter and the cop and this? I mean, he's a single father, right? That's established. Clearly, it's a relationship where it's the father, the daughter, the grandmother, all kind of living together, coalescing, and he's doing the best he can. but he's also kind of like managing everything else. You know what I mean? And being there for his police force, his deputy as well. So that dialogue was kind of like, what's the most comforting thing that you can think of when it comes to losing somebody, right? And I even think about this myself, is that when you lose somebody close to you, it's tough to think back on it because it's like it hurts, right? You think about like the end, or depending upon what the scenario is, the final moments are usually a lot worse than the earlier moments, right? You think back to the earliest moment you have somebody you've lost, it's usually something that's a good one, right? The first time you met them, the first nice things that they, whatever the case may be. And I was like, let me convey that between these two, because they both mutually shared the loss of this woman that meant so much to them. You know what I mean? And then when it came to issue 2, it was like, how do I deconstruct that? And I was like, I know what's going to happen at the end of the issue, but how do I make it even worse? And it was like, issue 2 was really about making things as worse as possible.
No, you took them to hell in that issue, bro.
Yeah.
I love a writer like you, because I know exactly the headspace you're in for it. Because you're like, I want to tug on the heartstrings, and you write as a writer, like especially with horror and things that are meant to like hit you, because the best horror writers speak to things that scare them themselves.
Right.
And there's very few things that scare horror writers. So to scare a horror writer with their own writing is hard.
Yeah. I think so.
And that's you for sure.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I think what I'm working on right now is probably one of the scariest things I've ever written. And I don't know, like I'm even nervous like doing the research on it, because I have to like do like a little bit of like the deep dive on stuff that like I don't I don't normally visit, because it's just like it freaks with me. It's like purposely, if it's like having arachnophobia and purposely Googling spiders. You know what I mean?
Yep. Trust me.
That's Seabass right there.
I've been there. I've been there.
Like it's hard for me to find anything nowadays horror wise to like get really into. Like I always go back to like the old school horror, or like the old school monster movies, or live with real prosthetics and everything. Like I always like that type of stuff. When it comes to horror literature, like I haven't been able to find anything that I can really chew on. But there've been a couple stories where there's a short story by Stephen King called The Jaunt. I don't know if you guys ever read that one.
Vaguely familiar. I've heard the name, but I don't think I've read it.
It's like a sci-fi horror.
Okay.
Right. And you learn about people have discovered instant travel between long distances between let's say the Earth and the Moon. And these kids are going with their family, going to take the jaunt. That's what they call it. And the kids are asking their dad, hey, can you tell us about the jaunt? And you learn, as the father recalls the story, how the jaunt was discovered. And it was discovered through some science experiments that people who go through this portal, they come out the other side. While they've been awake, they end up just dying. Just they die or they go crazy. And you find out that they need to be asleep. They need to be asleep to get through the jaunt. So when you get into the bus thing, they give you anesthesia. You take the jump and you wake up. The story ends with this kid who's really that's one of the sons. He's really excited, and his father tells him all this stuff that when the mask comes on, he holds his breath. So he's not asleep when they make the jump. And when the father wakes up, you hear the mother yelling and screaming as they're grabbing his son as he's going mad. And his mad looks back at his dad and he says, it's longer than you think, Dad. It's longer than you think. And you find out, like thinking about it, that the time and space, it takes like a second to get from the place you're destined from the Earth to the Moon. But what's happening is that your consciousness, why people think they're going mad, is that they're in like this space for millions and millions and billions of years. But they're in and out physically in like a couple seconds, and it makes them go mad, and they die. And it's really, it's really
that's some like Lovecraft level of madness. I love that.
It's really dope. I would read it. Like you get the story more, but like that's the like because it. So I found it after watching Love, Death, and Robots. I was like on the Reddit.
That was awesome too, by the way. That was fantastic.
I was on the Reddit looking it up, and someone mentioned the jaunt and said that line, it's longer than you think. And so I was like, it was like in the middle of the night, my wife was sleeping. I'm like, well, I need to read this short story now. And then I found a PDF of it, and like I was like, oh shit, like I can see why people really, really like Stephen King. I just never read any of his work, and it's like, you know, it's a dedication because his shit is long.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys get a chance, it's a short story. Check it out. It's really cool. It's like a mix of horror and sci-fi, and
It's on my list for sure. Yeah, like the like I like cosmic horror too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Love some Lovecraft stuff, things of that nature, or just like, you know, depths of badness. And I love that. It's like the mind lives far, far beyond which the body is capable for it to. So,
Yeah.
and essentially, it's driving you mad, right?
yeah,
I love that.
A lot of people know you as a writer, comic guy, but I also know you as someone who is just excellent, in my opinion, with marketing, because the way you show up to cons at your booths, everything just screams marketing and helps to, you know, get your stuff out there, not only to the public, but make people feel comfortable when they see you. How did this all start? When I saw you at Connecticut, let's use that one for example.
Like Terrificon's booth, do you mean?
The Terrificon booth, yes. Let's go with that one. Let's
all
start
right.
with that one.
So the Terrificon booth, what I wanted to do is I wanted to build the cafe from Surrounded by Death. So when you see Matt for the first time in issue 2, after all the events at the end of issue 1, he's standing on a cafe stand where they realize that they've run out of the espresso presto blend, the vanilla blend. So I bought kind of like a pop-up portable bar thing, and I'm like, I'm gonna build the thing from the book. I want to bring a piece of my book to the, you know, to the convention floor to people. So what I did was I kind of took it a little bit step further. I bought like, you know, like the nice tiled carpeting layout, and, you know, I bought like a nice real espresso presto backdrop, and I was like, I'm going to make this the fictional cafe from the, you know, from the book. So I got myself like a green barista apron that says espresso presto, and I was brewing coffee at the show, giving it away for free if they would buy the book. And that was kind of my loophole with the whole, like, you know, selling food kind of thing, is that it's in their art exhibit and the coffee's complimentary if they want it, if they buy something, you know?
Well done, sir. Well done.
No, it was an excellent setup. You had people there all weekend hanging by your booth. And
so go on. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I put a little cafe table, you know, I made it very, and it was an inlet booth. You walked into it, right?
Mhm.
So it was a very welcoming experience. I wanted people to like walk in, hang around, read the books, maybe get a T-shirt, and then, you know, a cup of coffee, and then, you know, they can leave saying like, hey, I like did something cool at the convention today. You know what I mean? If you think at most convention booths, people just walk up to a table, they walk past it, and then, like, you know, there's only so many times you can do that. How many chances do you get to actually walk into the booth and hang out with the person that's kind of like doing the thing, right?
yeah.
You know, most creators kind of have a table behind them, and it's like a barrier. Well, I'm like, well, hey, come into my barrier and chill with me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like I said,
I just think that's just like an upper level of being a booth exhibitor. You know, like you're creating this atmosphere for folks to enjoy themselves and to feel comfortable and feel welcomed and to learn more about you, because you have to differentiate yourself from all the other exhibitors there. And then you have this whole thing of keeping them
A
inside.
very memorable experience.
Yeah, and like as you keep folks inside longer and longer and longer, it's gonna be like, well, I gotta buy more shit, you know. So like it's a hook and a line, and you always got like this gravitas, this personality that people just want to just hang out with, dude. Like that's awesome. That is awesome. And
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's
Absolutely.
if anyone who's listening take anything from that, it's just to like eventually see yourself to know like there are different tiers in exhibiting, and like, dude, this is like top notch.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I guarantee you've had people that just came in. They're like, oh, they're coffee. They're talking to you for so long that they go, well, I've been here for like an hour. I might as well buy all the comics, and the coffee and this, because they get lost in the conversation with you and they genuinely love the experience that you're giving them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the coffee overshadows the comics, and that can be a little bit tough sometimes, because I'm really, at the end of the day, I'm there to push books.
Right.
You know, and a lot of it's because it's like all my books are collaborative efforts. Like they're owned by other people as well, so I have to do my due diligence for not only myself but for them to put money in their pockets for their artwork and their hard work. So like it's like a little bit of that balance, you know, it's like inviting people in, building the fan base, but also supporting the talent that I work with. You know, Joe Martinez, you know, Mark Alvarado, you know, Joseph Arnold, all wonderful. Renatus, who did The Pond, all wonderful individuals.
Even when we meet you at Creative AfterCon, you're still that person 100% where you're welcoming, you're there, you love comics, because it wasn't about, again, it's not about the coffee for me. It was the fact that you speak to Johnny C, you hear about Johnny C's love for comics. So it's like, okay, so what did this guy create? And I think that's one of the bigger marketing tools that you have there, is that you're generally who you are.
Well, exactly. I kind of, you know, what you see is what you get, and I wear it all on my sleeves. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't have to put on a face or do a thing at a show because I'm just being me. You know what I mean? And like I said before, I'm under the mentality that I wrote these books for myself. So, you know, if I could share them with you and you're into them, that means the world to me. The fact that you guys love The Pond and Surrounded by Death, like, means the world to me, more so than any financial value. You know what I mean? Like, that is what means the most, is what people read the work and they love it. I got Surrounded by Death Kickstarter in the works, so that's the next big thing.
Yes.
Nice.
And I'm relaunching my movie preview page, which is a movie fan site on Facebook. So,
Nice.
you know, just movie fandom, stuff like that. Oh, and a horror film I just worked on called Vibration. I was assistant director on it.
Cool.
Is now available on Amazon Prime.
Ooh.
Congrats!
Oh, okay, cool.
We're going to be doing an episode about horror movies, and one of them on there's Leviathan. Yes.
We're doing B-list horror movies.
Yes.
Wait,
Yes. Let's set the table. Yes, I have the pleasure of finding out how I can watch Rawhead Rex.
Oh, Rawhead Rex, it's a classic.
Oh, shit.
Oh my goodness.
If you want in, Johnny, we got people.
It's so
right back.
like,
If I'm in, I got one in the back of my head already.
Seabass threw together like this most obscure list ever at us, and
I
like,
don't even think it was that obscure. I was being generous.
It's just
guys, take
Blows
notes.
my-
Take
no.
notes.
Listen. Like how Law had said, like you know, they gave you that the Gaiman comparison. I'm thinking you got to take your thought process. You got to go down to New Mexico. You got to go to the cabin where George R. Martin is. You got to tell him how the get Daenerys out of Marine and just give him a whole web of shit so my man can finish book 6, book 7, book 2 of like he just needs to finish everything. He needs to go on his DOS computer.
I gotta call Marvel, and I gotta bully George R. Martin.
Johnny.
Be like, listen,
You
George.
got a
I know.
lot of phone calls.
It's like, listen, George. I know you've been writing since the '90s and before, and you've never met me, but I've got the move to get you ahead. With you.
Would you like a George R. Martin story? I have a really funny George R. Martin story if you guys would like to hear it.
Oh, please.
Absolutely.
So